bit. But we actually are going to talk about that. But another case we're going to talk about right now is something that you've seen in the news about leaked celebrity photos. I'm sure you've seen this all in the news, but there have been photos of private photos of Tiger Woods and his ex-girlfriend Lindsey Vonn, as well as other celebrities like Kristen Stewart and Miley Cyrus. These photos have been leaked. Their phone, their iCloud accounts have been hacked. The photos have been distributed online. And the question remains, what legal action can they take, if any? So here to help me talk about this, as well as the John Valerio case, I'm here with my very good friend, Adam Gana, a very esteemed trial attorney out of Chicago, managing partner of Gana LLP. Adam, always great to see you.
Good morning, Jesse. Always great to see you as well. So, Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods. Well, before that, let me just say, as I said in the break, thank you for, with your diplomas all in the background, making us feel all bad about ourselves. But now I see we're in good company. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about these leaked photos. Obviously, we keep seeing it all over. Every year, new leaked photos, things like this happen. I'm going to start very general, and then we're going to get a little bit more specific. Right. When you see this, do they have a cause of action? And then we'll break it down what kinds of legal areas we might be looking. But do they have a case to go after people or websites that are distributing or showing these photos?
So they do have a case, and what is happening to these celebrities is reprehensible. Their iPhones are getting hacked, their accounts are getting hacked, and the question is, what is it they can do about it? And so the principal thing that a lot of these celebrities are doing are they're suing companies for invasion of privacy. You may remember the Hulk Hogan case, and in Hulk Hogan's case, he sued Gawker and won approximately $140 million for invasion of privacy claims. The problem that a lot of these celebrities are having is that you can sue the person that has stolen the information from you. That's a criminal problem. But you can't sue a website like 4chan, for example, because they're protected by the Communications Decency Act. And so the law has not caught up. The long and short of it is the law has not caught up with this type of what I like to refer to as a sexual crime, the theft of these photos and videos from celebrities.
So let's back up a little bit. You said let's first talk about the people that hack their devices. You said anybody that would hack their actual phone or hack their iCloud devices, that's a federal crime. Am I correct? They could face serious fines and imprisonment. So let's first deal with those people.
Sure. So the perpetrator that stole the photos from Mila Kunis and Christina Aguilera, he ultimately faced, I think, 10 years in prison and ended up getting a $66,000 fine for his conduct. Catching these people is part of the problem. They use proxy servers and various things on the internet to prevent themselves from being caught. And so it's very hard to find the people that own these websites and that actually do the hacking.
Yeah, let's expand upon that. So a lot of times you'll see websites, they'll host their platforms offshore thinking, hey, we're in a different country. Don't worry about U.S. laws, but it's not that simple, because if you are violating United States laws and you are operating a website where, you know, there are ways when you have a domain name, you can look online to see where it's registered, who it's owned by, and if they're operating actually within the United States, then they have to deal with laws like revenge porn laws, those kinds of laws, and other kinds of criminal penalties. So the first thing that we have to understand is if you have a website, your identity isn't hidden. You might even be faced with, if people like celebrities really want to go after you, subpoenas to try and find out who's operating these websites and where. And if you're operating in the United States, you could face some sort of trouble.
That's exactly right. If you are operating within the United States, you can face trouble. The problem is, well, there are a number of problems, right? So the first is, you're not going to face trouble if you didn't actually do the hacking. So if a hacker posts their information onto a free website like 4chan or some other website like Reddit, they are not going to face, Reddit or 4chan is not going to face criminal responsibility.
Well, let's talk about a few different areas of law, and we'll break it down. Right of publicity, okay? That's the right of celebrities or people in the industry to make sure that people don't profit off of their images. So if you have a website that's hosting naked photos of a celebrity or compromising photos of a celebrity, asking people to pay money to view these photos, Isn't that a violation of the right of publicity statutes?
That's right, and invasion of privacy statutes as well. So the problem is when those right to publicity images become public. Once they become pervasive, they become newsworthy. And so that's an ambiguous standard, but a standard that allows these images to become quote unquote newsworthy at some point in the very near future after becoming public. And so that is a real problem for the right to publicity laws that help protect celebrities from having these images used for profit.
Okay, let's deal with celebrities that take selfies of themselves, mirror selfies, regular selfies. And why am I talking about this? Because of copyright issues. You take a photo of yourself, you necessarily own the copyright in that photo. So if someone, a celebrity, takes a naked photo of themselves, they own the copyright in that photo. If someone else posts it on a website, isn't that copyright infringement? Or, as you said before, because those websites are just hosting the photos, they might be able to skirt legal liability.
I mean, it very well could be copyright infringement. The biggest problem is identifying who owns the website. With these proxy servers that allow people to own websites anonymously, it could take years to find the person that's hosting the website. The image could become newsworthy during the interim period. It costs a ton of money to seek injunctive relief and damages in these types of lawsuits. It takes years, and then the moment you win and the site goes down, a new site can go up, and you'd have the same problem all over again, which is why celebrities are sometimes able to fight and win these types of cases, but your average victim of revenge porn is not.
It's terrible. It's terrible to think about the danger of having photos taken, stolen, shown everywhere. At the end of the day, it's up to individual people not to view it. I know that when Jennifer Lawrence had that issue several years back, she said to anybody, and I'm paraphrasing her words, but if you look at that, you are a criminal. You are invading my privacy. She might not have the law to back her up on that, but basically it's up to every individual person to make the decision not to look at that and not invade someone's private life and viewing them in a compromising position that they never meant to be seen. One of the arguments that has been made, or one of the issues that seems to complicate it, is there any First Amendment right? And what I mean by that is there a news exception to this, in the sense that the printing images, them going to different websites, this becomes a story, sometimes these pictures are recirculated. Is that a First Amendment right to share those images?
It depends if they're newsworthy or not. So the first person that shares them, if it's not newsworthy, it's just clickbait, then it is not a First Amendment issue. But once it becomes newsworthy, Jennifer Lawrence has her phone hacked and it becomes newsworthy, then it can be a First Amendment issue. And that's something that is an ambiguous standard that needs to be played out through the courts. But you had said something earlier that I found very interesting, which is if a celebrity takes a selfie, is that copyright infringement? The real question is if someone else takes a picture of a celebrity and has that picture on their phone, whether or not the celebrity has any action against the person who's publishing that photo, or whether the person that took the photo has the action.
Right, because if you own the copyright, you also own the right to how that picture is disseminated and publicly viewed. It's one of the rights that you have as part of a copyright holder. So yeah, it's a question that, you know what it is a lot of times, and we're going to talk about one more area of law with this. In practice, talking about it theoretically, oh, you could try and do this, you can try this. Lawsuits are expensive, and trying to go after everybody that publishes a photo, views a photo, it can be costly. It can be you might not win this journey. And if we are able to close one website, another one can pop up 2 minutes later. That's the danger of trying to, once something is out, it's very hard to actually contain it. But I want to actually tell our viewers, just talk to our viewers a little bit. There's a term, and you might have mentioned it before, revenge porn. It's a term that we hear thrown out a lot whenever there's leaked photos. Can you just elaborate a little bit about what that is and how it might relate to these photos? Is it only in a situation where you have a jilted lover trying to, there was people who were in a relationship, they had access to photos, as part of a relationship gone bad, they are the ones who leak it. Is that the right term for revenge porn?
So that's part of it, it's included in revenge porn. So revenge porn there are laws now in the United States across, I think probably 2/3 of the states in the United States at this point, that have revenge porn laws against revenge porn. And revenge porn basically is when somebody takes photos or videos of someone without their permission in a sexually compromising area or way and post those photos or videos publicly. And if you do that, you can be subject to criminal fines and/or imprisonment.
Adam, would you like to see a tightening of these laws, a little bit more of clarification to protect people, not just celebrities, but people in general? I know Catherine McPhee, who's in dealing with this herself, says that there needs to be a revamping of the law on this, and they really need to take it seriously. And we are in a day and age where you can share information, you can share photos in a way that you wouldn't be able to do in the past. It's so easy to get something up there, and once it's online, like I said, it's hard to contain it. What would you like to see a change in the laws in a perfect world?
I'd like to see the law look more like child pornography law, because with child pornography law, viewing, disseminating carries very large criminal and civil penalties. And so if we had the same type of law for revenge porn, it would immediately have an effect on the ability of these perpetrators to be able to post and disseminate and to view these types of images online.
I agree. In the end of the day, it's about deterrence. It's about deterring people from hacking these phones, from disseminating these images. So I agree with you. Really, towards that vein seems to be the right response. If you were representing any of these celebrities, and maybe you will represent any of these celebrities, you're an amazing trial attorney, what would you recommend for them to do? What course of action would you like them to take? And if you had some clients who were nervous about them being victims in the future, what would you tell them to do?
So to answer your first question, it would be a trifurcated approach. The first is civil action. I would have my client sue for invasion of privacy. I would have them sue for their right to publicity, the websites that are currently publishing the inappropriate conduct. I'd have them sue for an injunction and for monetary damages. I would then have them lobby Congress to change the law. When you're a celebrity, you have power that normal people don't necessarily have, and you can use that power to help these laws get changed. And then the third thing I would have them do is I would have them report the conduct criminally to their local attorney general and district attorney's office.
Yeah, and then just people proactively in the future. What are the best practices here? Don't take the photos.
This is a hard one to answer, but that's essentially it, right? Be careful who you take photos with. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's inappropriate to take nude photos. I would sit here and say you have to be very careful about technology in today's day. Everything you do is recorded, and so it's important to remember that when making decisions.
And the scary part about it is too, and I've spoken to people about this, is even if you delete something, it's not really gone. So once you take something, we handle so many cases on here, and when we see text messages that people delete, sooner or later in that trial, they're up on the screen for the jury and the world to see. When you delete something, it's not necessarily gone, so sometimes best practices of being careful about what you take, where you take it, and like you said, who you share it with. So Adam, that was great in terms of the leaked photos issue, and we're going to be talking about it more here on Law News. I want to switch gears because we have you here. I want to talk a little bit about the John Valerio case, the case out of Las Vegas. Again, this is the retrial of John Valerio in terms of the death penalty phase. He's already been found guilty. So Adam, we haven't had a chance to talk about this case. I'm just curious, what are your first impressions about this case? Seeing a retrial about a death penalty, a man who was convicted, who was sentenced to death. There was an unconstitutional jury instruction about depravity of mind. That standard that was set in Las Vegas has now been changed. It's no longer depravity of mind. It's a little bit of a different standard. What we're looking at now is a series of aggravating factors to determine if he should be sentenced to death, or in a series of mitigating factors that might exculpate him from that. Initial impressions about this case as you've been viewing it?
Well, the law has changed because, not only in part because of this case, but because what does depravity of mind mean? Can a reasonable person in their mind be able to determine whether somebody is guilty of depravity of mind? And what I believe the appellate courts were saying when they overturned the death penalty decision here was that term, depravity of mind, is too ambiguous for a jury to make a determination under it. So that's why they have these standards now, and these aggravated standards to determine whether or not a individual defendant should get the death penalty or not.
Right, because wouldn't the argument be someone who murders someone in cold blood is always an issue of depravity of mind, and it would be, in a term that we know in law, is a strict liability. I mean, it really doesn't matter. If he committed this crime, he should be sentenced to death. That's all that it is. There should be no factors. He committed the murder. That's enough to say that he should be sentenced to death. However, that standard, like you said, was a little too ambiguous. And some of the aggravating factors that we're going to be looking at here is, was there torture or mutilation? Was there a threat of violence? Was this just a random crime with no motive? Was there non-consensual sexual penetration? These are kinds of things that might come up in terms of in the jury's mind about aggravating factors. And really, all they have to show is one aggravating factor to find him that he should be sentenced to death. And when you look at those things, this is a guy who stabbed this prostitute over 45 times. One of the times, I believe, was in her genitalia region. So when you have that, it might be enough to see that he gets the death sentence. I'm curious about those thoughts.
You know, with this particular case, I'd bet you dollars to donuts he's going back to get the death penalty after the conclusion of this case. I mean, while depravity of mind may no longer be the standard that's appropriate in a case like this, you said it yourself, the aggravating factors in this case, he has been convicted of murder still, and so he's still guilty, and that's something that I think our viewers really need to understand, is that Mr. Valerio is still guilty of murder, and this is only to determine whether or not he will spend the rest of his life in prison or ultimately get the death penalty. And the factors in this case seem to be quite aggravating. So I think that there is a very good likelihood that you will see this man back on death row. And
we saw earlier in the week, before we're actually about to show a clip of Valerio speaking with the jury, and I would like, Adam, just your impressions after we watch that video.
Sure.
But the one thing I want to say right before, we saw a couple of days ago, there was testimony about what was John Valerio like as an inmate. What was he like in the prison? And we saw testimony from the warden basically explaining that, look, he first got in there, young kid, kind of nervous, he was a troublemaker, he was getting in trouble. Then as the years progressed, he matured, he really didn't get into serious violence. Who committed this crime, even if he was the best prisoner you can possibly have in, during his 31 years in prison, does that really matter? Is that really enough to convince a jury that, he was really good in prison and he doesn't deserve to be sentenced to death?
Look, it could be. I mean, juries have that. The reason why there's a catch-all for mitigating factors is because the law didn't want to limit what a jury can consider when making a determination as to whether or not to put someone to death. I mean, there's no more serious punishment than that under the law. And so if you are going to have the right to put someone to death, I believe the law was written in such a way that you can really consider anything. And if the man is not the same man he was 31 years ago when he was originally convicted of stabbing this prostitute, then maybe that is something that the jury should consider. But remember, they're considering whether or not to let this man rot in prison for the rest of his life or to have him ceremoniously put to death. So, that is a very weighty decision to have to make. So,
Not an easy
I think it's
decision.
appropriate.
Exactly. Not an easy decision for them to make. And one of the things that they had to consider yesterday, the day before, was John Valerio speaking with them. So, Adam, I want to play that clip, get your impressions of his, how he communicated to the jury, if it was effective. So let's take a look at that clip, and we'll be back here with Adam Gana.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I wanted to talk to you first and foremost because I wanted to talk to you and look at you and let you hear my voice. And of course, I also thought that if I was sitting in this chair, I would probably want to hear from me. So for those two reasons, I wanted to speak to you. First and foremost, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not remorseful and that I don't think of Miss Blackwell and the things that happened in 1986. I want you to know that. Okay, let's see here. I didn't write a statement because there were a couple of things I wanted to talk about, so please bear with me. My family, Ms. Blackwell and her family were also affected by this, and I want to apologize to them, Ms. Blackwell's friends, my family and friends who have stood by me throughout my incarceration, and I know it hasn't been easy for them. This has been a lot for a lot of people. The last 31 years, I've heard a lot of talk about how I changed or how I haven't changed. There's been discrepancy about that. I feel that I have, specifically the term mentally, physically, and spiritually. Those three elements are essentially what I've taken in one day at a time. And it starts with mentally, and the reason it starts with mentally because if you're reading spiritual, if you're concerned about being physical and working out and exercising, if you're not mentally intact, the rest they don't go together. So I started with that. I took an assessment of myself and the things I've done in the first 21 years of my life when I first got incarcerated. I think it's probably not very difficult to see that I was a menace. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I made a lot of mistakes. I did some things right, but I did a lot of things wrong. Now, the past 31 years, prison does a lot of things for you. It gives you time to take a look at yourself every day in the mirror when you shave, every time you have a conversation with somebody. And you can either do one of two things. You can either change or you can remain the same. A good friend of mine once told me, her mother actually told her this, and it was a really good quote. She said, my mom used to tell me when you're down on your hands and knees, probably the best thing you can do is pray while you're down there. I did that, and I'm still doing that. I don't run around with a Bible telling everybody how I'm religious or how they need to change their lives, but I do read spiritual material, things that are positive. I made better choices today. And to me, making better choices, things get easier when you make better choices. I mean, rules, various things that I've done throughout my incarceration, they're because of those things. My way of thinking, I try to associate myself with positive people, encouraging people. I try to be encouraging, I try to be positive. And every once in a while I realize that I've made a difference to somebody. I don't do it for self-acknowledgement or a tap on the back, but it does feel good every once in a while when somebody acknowledges that you made a difference for them and to them. I've done that in prison, I've done that with pen friends, I've done that with my parents. They've seen a change in me. I know I've changed, and I haven't changed because I knew this hearing was coming 15 years later. I haven't had a lack of charges for 17 years because I knew that I was going to be in front of you making this statement someday, and, well, I want to convince them, look at what I've done here. That's not why I changed. I changed because I'm being accountable for all of the things that I've done. I've changed it, as I explained. When I was at my lowest, there was only one way up. I had to make changes. There was a good person in there. Was there a good person the first 25 years? As I said, I did a lot of things right, but I also did a lot of things wrong. So I'm being honest about that. I also wanted to talk about my plans for the future if at any given time I'm ever given the opportunity for a chance at parole. I'll have to continue to do the things I told you about. Because if I don't, that chance will never take place. But I won't do those things to make it to a parole board to please them. I'm going to continue to do those things just like I've continued to do for the past 31 years when I didn't see that there was a chance at a parole board somewhere down the line. Because that's who I am. It's not a facade. There's nothing fake about that. That's just what I'll continue to do. And I'll do my best not to let anybody down. If that ever happens somewhere down the line, I don't know. That's going to be your decision. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap this up because for the most part, like I said, I wanted you to hear my voice, see my face, and speak to me. I've been over there for a couple of weeks, just taking notes. And I'm going to wrap it up for now. I'm grateful for your patience and understanding. Thank you.
Welcome back to Law News Network. I'm Jesse Weber. You were watching John Valerio speak to the jury in his retrial hearing about his death penalty sentence. And what he said is, I wanted you to hear my voice, see my face, hear my words about what has been going on with me while I've been in prison for 31 years. I want you to see that there's a change in me because I am held accountable for what I've done. I'm not the same person that I was when I first came into prison. He apologized to his family and friends as well as to the family and friends of Karen Blackwell, the victim in this case, the woman who he brutally murdered, stabbed over 45 times. And I want to talk with our guest today, Adam Gana from Gana LLP, managing partner, amazing trial attorney, to talk a little bit about what we just saw. Adam, you saw Mr. Valerio speaking to the jury. Did you think that that was effective?
I do. I always think it's effective when you're dealing with the death penalty to have the jury hear the voice of the perpetrator. I think that it makes a huge difference on a jury's ability to be able to convict someone to death. And so I think it was the right decision on behalf of the defense attorney to allow him to testify on his own behalf. And I think that it may have some weight with the jury when they are ultimately making their decision.
Because at the end of the day, as terrible and heinous as a crime as it is what he committed, you are, as a juror, are now put in charge of determining the life and death of another human being. And as terrible as someone is or what they've done, and especially seeing them that close, it's not so easy to just say they should be killed. That's
right. It's much easier for a faceless, nameless determination. And so, like I said, I think it's the right decision by the defendant's counsel to allow him to testify.
So let me ask you, I'm going to switch gears on you. If you were arguing for the state and you wanted to see John Valerio put to death, how would you tailor your argument, and would you include his speech to the jurors in your crafting your argument? I'm curious what kind of case you would put forward if you were the state.
Absolutely. So if I was the state, I'd remind the jury of exactly what Mr. Valerio did. He stabbed a woman 45 times in the chest, repeatedly, over in the chest, in the genital region, all over her body. I would remind them in graphic detail what this man did to find himself in prison in the first place. And while people can change, does it really look like Mr. Valerio changed? He wasn't talking about God. He was vaguely talking about spirituality and kind of helping people. I would utilize his own words against him to make it show that there is no real remorse there. And that's what I would do.
And finally, if you were the defense, you're defending him, and we talked a little bit about why putting him on the stand to speak to the jurors is important. How would you craft your argument if you were the defense?
I would remind him of all the things he's done since the crime, right? You can't take away from the crime that he actually did. You can't make that go away. But you can change who you are as a person since the crime occurred. And so I remind the jury of all of the things that Mr. Valerio has done since the crime occurred. He's been virtually a model inmate. He helps friends, people in the, he's not a problem for the COs or the officers in prison. He's become a model citizen in prison. And so those are things that the jury should take into consideration. At least that's what I would argue if I was in the defense.
Adam, you put on two good points. I don't know which one to go with. That's why you're a great attorney. We appreciate you coming on today to talk about the leaked photos issue in terms of celebrities, as well as the John Valerio case. We look forward to having you back to talk about either of these cases or new cases that we have in the future. You provided some great perspective. And as always, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for having me.
Of course. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye, Jesse.